Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review the first issue of the comic book Female Furies. Now this is a comic book that I've been waiting for quite a while, kind of anxious to see how it would turn out, particularly after the Mr. Miracle series. Now, early signs were that it was not going to be in the same vein as Tom King's Mr. Miracle. After all, Tom King's Mr. Miracle sort of took place all in all in Mr. Miracle's head. And, well, I'll say this, that one thing that the Mr. Miracle series did is that it gave Big Barda a lot of attention. Big Barda is a fantastic character. She's a character that basically she led the Female Furies. She was the leader of the Female Furies, and it was her love for Scott Free that ultimately led her to abandon the Female Furies, abandon the leader of the Female Furies, Granny Goodness, and essentially flee with Scott Free to New Genesis, and she basically is no longer a member of the Female Furies. And it was in fact that it was in part that was combined with the portrayal of Scott Free as Mr. Miracle leaving Apocalypse, who was the adopted son essentially of Darkseid, that led Darkseid to basically end the peace, the so-called peace agreement between New Genesis and Apocalypse when they exchanged sons, and where Highfather would raise Orion and Darkseid would raise Mr. Miracle. And Mr. Miracle basically fell in love with Big Barda. They basically flee. She leaves the Female Furies. That led to the breakdown of that peace, and ultimately the war between New Genesis and Apocalypse ultimately resumed. Now that's really the Cole's Notes version. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's it in kind of a nutshell. Now, the Fourth World mythology is so rich in lore. It's very, very interesting here. And cutting right to the chase on this focuses on the sexual discrimination that Granny Goodness faced and all her Female Furies faced while they were trying to rise in the ranks from being lowlies, what they call the lowlies on Apocalypse, the lower economic classes, the lower poor classes, the poverty-stricken masses of Apocalypse. You were called a lowly, and Granny Goodness was basically a lowly, and she rose through the ranks to become essentially leader of the Female Furies, and really a leader of a lot of Darkseid's armies. And she also would come to Earth and basically steal children from orphanages, and also have an orphanage on Apocalypse where she would sort of train children for Darkseid's army. And of course her primary army was of course the Female Furies. What I find curious about Cecil Castellucci's approach to this, it's very anti-male, which I found very curious, and I'll just cut right to the chase. From a storytelling point of view, I didn't like it because it robs the mythology of the Fourth World. It changes it, actually, and it actually, in my view, belittles the characters of Darkseid and Granny Goodness. Now, I don't care if you want to tell a tale if you want to tell a revenge tale of a bunch of women being, raped and humiliated by men and they get their revenge, that's good. I mean, I love a good revenge movie every now and then, a good revenge story. I get it. If that's a story you want to tell, well, I guess that's a story you want to tell, all right? It's just that this isn't really the appropriate book to do it. And while it might seem that way on the surface, using the Female Furies to tell that story is also not appropriate either. And there's a number of reasons why, and I'm going to say those right now. Number one, Female Furies rose in the ranks on Apocalypse because they kicked ass. They were that good, they were that powerful. And Darkseid respected that, and he respected Granny Goodness. In this issue, they degraded Darkseid by even having him essentially force himself on Granny Goodness, or rather suggest to Granny Goodness if she didn't have sex with him, that she wouldn't rise in the ranks very quickly. So the suggestion that Darkseid would need to actually debase himself to actually have a woman, to force a woman essentially, or coerce a woman into having sex with him, is absurd. Darkseid has harems and harems and harems of women that absolutely worship him on Apocalypse. We've seen signs of this not only in the comic books but also in the animated series, where when Darkseid was defeated by Superman, the people of Apocalypse went to rescue and heal Darkseid because they're his god. They worship him. This opening story really reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of Darkseid, a fundamental misunderstanding of even Granny Goodness' obsession with Darkseid. Granny Goodness has a very interesting history with Darkseid. She started off as someone who was a lowly born on Apocalypse, but what this opening issue doesn't tell is Granny Goodness's actual history. How did she get to be noticed by Darkseid in the first place? Well, that is particularly an interesting story, and it's not even told here. And it's so sad that it's not. Basically, she was she was raised in the ranks, and she was, at one point, she was with a group of people. Darkseid commanded them all to basically train a pet. And she trained a pet to be a merciless pet, a dog called Mercy. And basically, one of Granny Goodness's handlers ordered her to kill her dog Mercy. And instead of doing that, Granny Goodness killed her handler. And when Darkseid confronted her and said, "Why did you do that?" And Granny Goodness told him, said, "Well, I did that because, I'm doing that for you, because this dog that I trained is basically your best servant. He does whatever I say it is, but there's only one person that he'll listen to more than me, and that's you, Darkseid." And Darkseid was very impressed, and was so impressed he commanded Mercy, Goodness's dog, to attack and kill her, which forced Granny Goodness to kill her own dog, Mercy. Well, that impressed the heck out of Darkseid. And right from that point on, he basically put Granny Goodness, he basically said, "Look, if you can do that, if you can train a quadruped, if you can train a dog to be that powerful, to be that obedient, to worship me, I'm going to make you in charge of my ranks." And he put Granny Goodness in charge of recruitment, put her in charge of the orphanages. Find me the best warriors on Apocalypse. And not only that, not only the best warriors on Apocalypse, but the best warriors on all the worlds of the multiverse. And that's what she did. And she, at the times, even stole children from other orphanages, even on Earth. That's Granny Goodness, and she's obsessed with Darkseid, and she worships Darkseid, just like all other of Darkseid's minions. Now, what this opening issue tries to do is it tries to expand, at least I'm assuming it tries to expand on Granny Goodness, because she's the leader of the female Furies. I mean, this is there's a lot of interesting backstory here, but unfortunately, all of it's ignored, and it's completely bastardized in this opening issue, and it's so sad. Basically, this is just Granny Goodness, being humiliated by Desaad and all the other high-ranking officials in Darkseid's upper executive echelon, and this is just becomes a game of sexual politics. And it's so sad and pathetic that the writer decided to assume that the gender roles are the same on Apocalypse as they are on 21st century Earth identity politics, a la Donald Trump, a la comic book culture war. It's pathetic, it really is. Rather than focusing on telling a vibrant and rich story that honors the heritage and the mythology of the fourth world, we're getting nothing but another derivative, by-the-numbers commentary of, just a bunch of angry women who get really upset because, God forbid, men put them down, and they're going to get really, 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 really angry about it. Good grief. Talk about one-dimensional. Now, here's where this thing could be. Could this comic book still be saved? It could. But let's talk about the characters here, the female Furies. They are Aurelie, who's at this point in time, this must take place before Big Barda becomes the leader of the female Furies, because Aurelie is the leader of the female Furies, and followed by Big Barda, Lashina, Mad Harriet, Stompa, and Bernadette. Or Bernadette. Those are the female Furies, and this character by the name of Willick, he's got he's very sexually attracted to Aurelie, and basically even Darkseid essentially coerces himself sexually onto Granny Goodness, and basically all the female Furies are just eye candy for everyone else, which completely ignores the reality of the mythology of the fourth world. These women are kick-ass women, they're warriors, they're seen as equals, and if they're not, they will kill you. They are respected by all of Apocalypse. They have reputations that exceed all of the parademons, the rest of the army combined. All of this stuff is established in Fourth World lore if you just take the time to look, and I'm wondering why the editors didn't bother. The editor here on this comic book didn't bother to do that, nor did the writer. Instead, we get this derivative tale where basically we just get this character named Willick sends one of his he's attracted to Aurelie. He wants to have sex with her. Aurelie doesn't want to have sex with him. Then we have Stephen Wolf, the bastard son of Darkseid send his underling Rublon to basically acquire a girl that the female Furies were supposed to kidnap, an orphan, and basically he makes a move on her, suggesting he wants to have sex with this woman, and O'Reilly slits Rublon's throat. How dare he do that? And now, okay, Big Barda and O'Reilly and the rest of the female Furies are now going to have to hide this body, and because now they've defied Darkseid, because they've killed one of the higher ranking officials in the higher command of Darkseid's army, and now that's probably going to be the plot line for 6 issues. What a terrible story. I'm sorry. Now, the thing is, if I'm reviewing a comic book, I shouldn't play script doctor, right? Because that's unfair. So since I can't play script doctor, all I can say is this story is disappointing. This story is disappointing. It doesn't take advantage of the rich mythology of the Fourth World. It bastardizes the characters, and it forgets one fundamental thing about these characters. And here, this is just it. And this is it. Here it comes. Ready? They're not supposed to be likable. They're evil. That includes Big Barda. Big Barda stopped being part of Female Furies when she fell in love with Scott Free. If this takes place before Big Barda meets Scott Free, Mr. Miracle, then that means she's a bitch too. Granny Goodness is evil. She's a torturer. She's a horrible, horrible person. So's Darkseid. So's everyone. Every single player in this issue is horrible. So to suggest that somehow there's going to be this typical everyday sexual discrimination in the workforce sort of thing when you're dealing with the most evil bastards and bastardesses in the multiverse is just ridiculous. This is so disappointing. No forethought went into this whatsoever. No respect of the mythology. This is appalling. This is absolutely appalling. But it is what it is. I don't like this story. It's by the numbers. I said, if you're going to tell a revenge tale, I don't mind a revenge tale every now and then of a bunch of angry women getting pissed off and killing a bunch of men. But that's all this is. And I guess, maybe that's what DC wanted. But, remember those scenes in Mr. Miracle, Tom King's Mr. Miracle, where Big Barda talks about her time in the pits of Apocalypse? And why did they name their son Jacob? They named their son they named their son Jacob. Big Barda and Mr. Miracle named their son Jacob off because of Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder was the ladder that you'd climb out of to get out of the pits of Apocalypse, where Granny Goodness would force them to go into. Granny Goodness did not just train women. Granny Goodness trained men as well. Everyone was equal. Granny Goodness's whole point was that everyone's equal. Everyone's capable of greatness. Everyone's capable of serving completely, utterly Darkseid. Men or women. She didn't have a preference one over the other. She had her female Furies, and maybe even if she did prefer the women over the men, this wasn't so blatant. This type of focus exclusively on the sexual deviations and the gender roles, it's sort of missing the point of Apocalypse. They got bigger fish to fry here. And in any event, while if there is a story to tell on gender politics on Apocalypse, this is clearly not the writer to tell that story, because this is really bad. This is first grade level stuff here. Oh my God, you said something bad to me. You said all I'm good at is to look at. They even had a bake sale in here. This is ridiculous. As if, what would make the writer think that they would have beauty pageants on Apocalypse? I mean, this is insulting. For God's sakes, come on, man. Just put a little bit of forethought into these stories. Pretend you care about the characters. But just ridiculous. The other thing here is ignoring mythology is, Darkseid's mother, Queen Hegra, after the father died, Queen Hegra ruled Apocalypse, and she actually commanded Desaad to poison Darkseid's mistress. Darkseid was in love with a woman by the name of Suli. Suli was actually a sorceress. Queen Hegra, his mother, thought that Suli was a bad influence on Darkseid, so she had Desaad poison and kill Suli. Now, again, this is not something that's told in this comic book. You'd think this is an opening comic book. If you're going to go back in time, at least tell the history a little bit, but none of this is told. Do you need to know it? Not necessarily. But still, it's interesting. Why wouldn't you want to educate the reader on that? In any event, this basically starts off with Darkseid essentially sending Granny Goodness in to kill Queen Hegra, his mother, because she killed Suli and because he wants to rule Apocalypse. And an interesting spin on the mythology is that they have Desaad come in at the last minute while Granny Goodness is struggling to try to kill Queen Hegra, and Desaad gives Granny Goodness some poison, and it's ultimately the poison that Granny Goodness pours into the mouth of Queen Hegra, which kills her, and then Desaad takes credit for the kill, and Darkseid, who very stupidly, Darkseid gives Desaad the credit despite seeing the fact that it's obviously Granny Goodness that's on top of Queen Hegra. It's obviously Granny Goodness that put the poison in Queen Hegra. Desaad had nothing to do with it. Also, it ignores the fact that Darkseid, I would presume at some point, must know that Desaad is the one who's responsible for killing his lover Suli. That's never brought up because, of course, that mythology is completely ignored. There's not enough backstory here to really know exactly what this writer is basing it on, and the story that is provided is one-dimensional and disappointing. So there you have it. Now, guys, tell me what you think of Female Furies. I'm very disappointed in it. It's much better if you just sit back and enjoy this as a bunch of one-dimensional characters, a bunch of psycho women who are as evil as men, except not as bad as men because they're women, right? Why aren't women as bad as men? Well, it's really simple. It's because men have penises and men only like us for sex. So that's why, that's basically the story here, guys. That's it in a nutshell. This is sexual politics. So even though the Female Furies and Granny Goodness are psychotic individuals, they're the most evil characters in the DC universe. Remember that. Everyone who's under Darkseid is evil as hell. They're all psychotic. They're all evil. They all want death and destruction for the multiverse. All of them do. But, make no mistake, the women are worse than the men. Why? Because the men think women are good looking and they might want to have sex with them once in a while. And because of sexual discrimination, even in the workplace on Apocalypse. It exists on Apocalypse. Can you believe that? Wow. Thank you for bringing identity politics and political correctness and all the Me Too movement. Thank you for bringing it into Apocalypse. We needed it so badly to make the mythology that much richer. Thank you, DC Comics. Anyways, take from that as you will, and we'll see. We'll see how much of it, how much of what I just said is in this movie when it comes out, which I'm going to stay optimistic and positive. I'm really looking forward to Captain Marvel. So I got my cap. I'm ready to go here. I'm not wearing my shirt, but in any event. Guys, tell me what you think of Female Furies. And hit the subscribe button. And follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. And until next time, Comic Boom out.